Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Joseph Carroll. I write under the pen name J.R. Carroll. And today is a fun one. We are talking about the clash of the Titans. The disheveled goblin himself, Daniel Greene, versus A.P. Canavan, aka a critical dragon, aka Dr. Fireballs. Now, as some of you may know, some of you may not, Daniel Greene made a video last week where he got into the Dresden Files TV show. His video, I believe, was titled something along the lines of How Not to Make an Adaptation. Now, AP made a rebuttal video a few days ago in where he mostly seemed to defend the production of the show and the producers of the show. At least that's the way I got it. Now, I've watched completely through both videos and I've picked out a few things to kind of moderate and give my thoughts on and tell you who I think is more in the right in the certain things that they brought up. Now, I believe Daniel Greene's video was about like 35 minutes long and AP's was about 45 minutes long. So I won't be able to get into everything, but I'm going to try to hit some highlights here. And if you're new to the channel, you may not know. If you've watched pretty much any of my videos, you know that I'm about as big a Dresden fan as there is. So I've went through the series 4 times, I think, and I'm actually going to be getting ready to do a reread and maybe doing some big discussions with some fellow booktubers. So I couldn't resist kind of getting into this and just giving my 2 cents. So let me take a look at my notes here and we'll kind of go through this process and see, see how it turns out here. Now, one thing that Daniel Greene brought up was in the TV show, they changed Harry's vehicle from a VW Bug into a Jeep, an old school Jeep. Now, Daniel's thought on this was there was no real reason to do that, or at least no reason he could see to do that. And it was, you would have, and kind of the point that he was making was, well, if you would have just put the Blue Beetle in there, you would have got some hardcore, fan hurrah, and oh, that's great, you put the Blue Beetle in, we love it. Now, on the other hand, AP's, view on the situation is a practicality. Now, the actor that played Harry was like my height. He's like 6'3" or something. And it would look awkward for a big man to be hopping in and out of a VW Bug. But that's kind of the charm of the book is, this Harry is 6'9", so, this really big guy kind of clunking and diving out of this little car. That's kind of the charm of it. But AP brought up a good point. You have to think about it from a production standpoint. You have to fit cameras into these cars. You have to fit, other people into these cars sometimes. Other random equipment. And that would be really hard to do in a Bug. So, but he thought that them choosing a Jeep was staying true to the source material because Harry messes up any modern technology. That's why he drives a Bug. and the Jeep is in the same age range, maybe even a little older. So he wouldn't mess up the Jeep's, technology, and it's easy to fix, um, which is another reason he has a bug. Now, again, I will say to AP's credit, he did throw in there that, well, maybe, they could have created a bug that was bigger, just fabricate one. But, then again, that comes down to budget, time. Um, but on this topic, I believe that it just came down to them not wanting to spend money and time, because that's not something that you couldn't have got around somehow. Modifying the vehicle would have been an easy way to do it. So I will, side with Daniel on that one. Now, a big one that Daniel brought up was Bob the Skull. Now, in the show, Bob is not a skull. He's played by, an actor. And, you know, AP made the point to where it was like, well, this show was back in the early 2000s. CGI just wasn't there quite yet. And, it would have just looked really clunky to try to do some animatronics or CGI. And I tend to agree with him, um, but it's just weird to me that he's not a skull. Um, but even more so than that, the character just wasn't consistent. Um, he didn't feel like Bob. Um, so I mean, I agree. I agree with everything that AP says there. Just how difficult it would be to make it that way. Um, but again, it just kind of just feels weird. It leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Um, and then they all. I'm gonna bring this up. This isn't really something that they like disagreed with. It's just something that they both brought up, or Daniel brought up, and then AP felt he had to just make a comment about it. Was um, the opening scene where Harry's in bed with a woman, and you know, there's another point where a woman's kind of like flirting with him, and AP's, um, it kind of makes Dresden out look out to be a womanizer or something, and AP kind of talked about how, well, that's kind of how a detective from back in the day. That's that was kind of a trope of them womanizing detective. And then they both kind of talked about, which is in the books, the male gaze of Harry. And this is something that comes up a lot, and I'm sure when I start getting into our discussions and stuff, we'll bring it up. But I just want to touch on it here. I understand that is in there for sure, but I actually think that Jim Butcher kind of tamed it down. Even, I mean, if some people think it was like, oh, well, that seems to be a little heavy. You guys got to remember, at the beginning of this, Harry's like 25 years old, and you're in his head. It's a first-person book, so you're in the head of a 25-year-old single guy who is doesn't get to be with a lot of women in the books. So what do you think is running through his head a lot of the times? And then again, in the books, he's around a lot of supernaturally super hot women, fairies and vampires and succubuses and all that stuff. So, I think you know, especially if you're a guy, if you were 25 years old at one point, you know, what was running through your head. I think it's a little bit tamer than people make it out to be. But moving on, a lot of what Daniel was saying, um, the story structure, and this is what a lot of people miss about who come to this TV show later. They're just like, oh, there was a Dresden TV show, let's check it out. And then the one thing they complain about is, the story arcs and everything, and how it's set up, episode by episode by episode. And AP kind of hit it on the head here when he said that, you know, that's just not how TV was done back then. You know, he went in really deep about, how network television, big long arcs are more made for streaming because you can always come back. If you missed an episode, if you missed a week, you can come back. Whereas you couldn't do that with network television. That's why they had to make it where each episode was its own thing. So if you missed the episode, it was okay. You'd still be fine coming back, and you wouldn't be mad about missing the episode. Which I definitely agree with AP on. But there is a problem with that. It was a sci-fi television show, and sci-fi, especially back then, would always play reruns of their shows, especially their newer shows or their popular shows. Now, a lot of those reruns would happen at nighttime, but if it's a show you were interested in, you could find a rerun before the next week came through. So it's a little bit of both. But definitely, people nowadays don't know, that TV was not ready for these big long arcs back in 2006, 7. It was around that time they were just not ready for that. And you could look around and you would find very few shows that had these long arcs like Dresden should have, or whenever Dresden does get remade, it will have. So, I'm siding more with AP on this one simply, because I understand. But again, there was that out that this was on Sci-Fi Channel, and they did run reruns a lot. Now, one thing they both talked about was the scene where Dresden is confronted by this boy who runs up to him and says, "Hey, are you Harry Dresden? You're Harry Dresden, right?" And he had this little slip of paper from, the phone book. And the kid, offers him like 5,000. This little kid offers him $5,000 to help him out, and Harry, and then the big thing that the disagreements between Daniel and AP was when the kid was asking for help, that telling him that there's monsters following me, and they're trying to get me. Harry tells him that there's no such thing as monsters. Now, in the book, Harry is always up front, and he's always, telling people, he's a public wizard. He's in the phone book. He went on a TV show, like Daniel said, at one point, and tries to tell everyone this is all real. Now, he's not really that blatant with it. It's more like he's not trying to hide it. He doesn't really broadcast it that often in the books, but he doesn't really hide it. It's mainly just that humans don't want to see it, so it just glosses past them, and they just don't notice the creepy things in the shadows. But AP makes a good point when he says, "Well, it's a little kid, and most of the time, there aren't monsters out to get you." And Harry would want to just put the kid at ease and just be like, don't worry, you know, there's no monsters. Because for 99.9% of people and kids, there wouldn't be. Um, but, you know, if you're trying to look at this from a, an actual, this is actually happening perspective, a real world perspective, Harry is probably doing the kind thing by telling the kid that they're not real, because he would assume that the kid's just seen things, and why scare the kid? Yes, this is an odd situation. A random kid runs up to you and tries to hand you $5,000. Um, but again, Daniel's point is, well, in the books, Harry's always broke, at least at the beginning. He's always broke, so, you know, would he at least he probably wouldn't take the kid's money, but he would definitely look into it. Um, but, Harry's probably doing the right thing by trying to ease the kid's mind. Um, and they both, you know, kind of came to the point of, well, more Daniel than AP about the show didn't have the best writing. I think AP was more on the side of the show probably was ahead of its time. They needed more CGI, more and better CGI, better cameras, better filmography, and all that. And Daniel's kind of more on the side of the writing was terrible. And I tend to side with Daniel on this one a little bit more. Yes, um, it's hard to do a show like this with such a low budget and the graphics of the time. I think it could have been done better, for sure. It could have. Um, but the writing was just off, and their casting. I'm not even saying that Harry's casting was bad, because a lot of people seem to like him in the show, but there was just, you know, Karen didn't look like Karen, and Susan didn't look like Susan, and all this jazz. But um, there was, you know, just so much wrong with this, this show. And in the end, I'm glad it only got one season, because they are gonna make another Dresden show here soon. Jim Butcher has said that he is personally looking over it now, and he is involved in the writing now. When it will happen, he doesn't know. He says, the way these things work is you just sit around, do nothing, and then all of a sudden you're 100 miles an hour, and you've got to get it done as fast as possible. So all us Dresden fans can hope and dream of when that day comes through. Now, I kind of was selling this as a big controversial debate and everything, but I think it's just Daniel has his opinion, and it was just a having fun opinion. And AP does come from that critical thinking, and he is an editor, a book editor, and everything. And he has this very good eye for, seeing how things need to be produced, and he has great movie reviews and stuff like that in TV shows. Um, so I see both sides of the coin, but in my overall opinion, it wasn't a great show, and and so we'll see how it all ends. I think I don't think if Daniel watched the video by AP, I don't think he would be mad, and I don't think that AP was doing it in any you know derogatory way or feeling any bad way towards Daniel. I just think that maybe he's seen the positives in the show. So tell me, what is your view on the Dresden TV show? Do you side with Daniel Greene? Do you side with AP? Are you with me and you're somewhere in the middle? Like, comment, subscribe. I'll do more videos like this if you guys want. So I'll talk to you all in the comments and see you later. Have a great day.